Okay, so I have some very specific examples that I just want to remind us of that we saw when we looked at the paradoxes and the Hamilton method. So way back when, last week, we had this example where we were apportioning 71 representatives, right, across 4 states, A, B, C, and D. And the results we got from the Hamilton method, so these are results from Hamilton, were that A got 8, B got 14, C got 21, and D got 28. But recall that when things sometimes change, like a representative change, and you go up to 72 representatives from the original 71 we saw before, that when you rerun the Hamilton method, right, we end up with these results here, right? Now, notice the differences and notice what happened here, right? So before, when there were 71 representatives, A got 8. Now that there's 72, there's more representatives, A only gets 7, right? So if I'm state A, I'm a little frustrated that I've lost a representative from the situation before when we had more representatives in total. So here, there's our A loses a rep, right? From what existed prior to this change, which was adding a representative. B is fine. They started with 14. They ended with 14. They're cool. C is actually happier because they started with 21 and now they have 22. So they gain. And the same thing for state D. They went from 28 to 29. They gain. So what's happening here is the act of adding one more representative triggers essentially one of the states that take a representative from someone else, and that extra representative that we added went to somebody that probably deserved it, right? So the Hamilton method has this paradoxical thing that happens where it causes someone to lose something they previously had, right? And this was a problem, and these are the paradoxes that we all talked about before. In particular, remember this one is the Alabama paradox, right? So just a reminder, this is the Alabama paradox. And what I showed prior to this one in the last video was an example of a population paradox, okay? And just a spoiler alert, you're gonna have a new state paradox that you'll see somewhere soon. Okay, let's take a look at how Jefferson resolves this thing. So I'm gonna watch what happens when I redo these examples, but with a Jefferson method. And again, I'm handing you a modified divisor or modified standard divisor. I apologize, this is old notation that I used to use. It's the modified standard divisor. It's the modified divisor that I mentioned earlier. So if I give you this modified divisor, all you have to do is find your quotas and lower quotas to make sure that this guy sort of works, right? So, so for state A, we're going to take our population, 1050, divided by our 139.5. And I'm going to go ahead and go through all these. Okay, so once I go through, do my calculations, chop off all my decimal parts, I get my whole number parts. I'll double check. 29 plus 21, that's 50, 64, 71. We have total of 71 reps, so it worked out. We used all 71 representatives that we initially started with, and so this means that our answer is the apportionment that state A gets 7 reps, state B gets 14 reps, state C gets 21 reps, and state D gets 29 reps, okay? So we're kind of just keeping track of, hey, this is the result in this particular scenario when we have 71 representatives. Let's take a look at what happens next when we increase the representatives and use the Jefferson method. So we're increasing our representative total to 72. We're gonna run through our quotas and lower quotas with our modified divisor of 139 and see what happens. Okay, I've gone through, found my lower quotas, 7, 14, 22, 29. If I add those up, I'll get 72, which will match the total number of representatives I was trying to give out. So Jefferson method in terms of calculation is really easy, but what's interesting is the results and how those results compare to the results we saw before with the Hamilton method. So let's let me write these out here real quick. So state A got 7, state B got 14, state C got 22, state D got 29, okay? So first thing I'm going to do, before I go back to the Hamilton results, let me just kind of compare these to Jefferson results here. So you'll notice that we had A at 7, A is at 7 again after the fact, B was at 14, B is now at 14, C was at 21, now C is at 22, D was at 29, D is now 29. So nobody lost anything that they had previously before in the first example. Adding the representative only caused state C to gain a representative and everyone else to stay the same. Now we're going to contrast this to the results that we saw in the Hamilton method, right? So in the Hamilton methods, when we started off this thing, when we started off this thing, state A had 8 representatives and then they lost a representative. So what this is telling me is that the Hamilton method's flaw actually was revealed the second time we used it after we added the representative. That's when the flaw was revealed. But the original problem was probably that Hamilton should not have been used first to give A 8 representatives, because Jefferson started off by giving A 7 representatives and never gave them any more. Hamilton, I think what really happened here, Hamilton accidentally gave state A 8 representatives early. When we added the representatives, they realized they shouldn't have, and this is in kind of I don't want to say that this is what they actually planned, right? This is what the math revealed, right? The math kind of revealed a problem in a practical sense that the results sort of ended up mathematically giving A something they shouldn't have had to begin with. So this is a problem with the Hamilton, is that it's sort of inconsistent, right? Jefferson seems to be more consistent. Like it as you add a representative, it adds a representative to one of the states. It doesn't move them around, essentially. So this gives you an idea of like how these methods kind of develop over time. You don't know you have a problem sometimes until a problem shows up. When that problem shows up, you try a new method. Turns out the new method might work better until that new method has its own set of problems. Okay, so it turns out that the Jefferson method is not perfect. There are examples where the Jefferson method actually breaks. Remember a while ago we had this thing called the quota rule. It'll actually break the quota rule. I'm not going to get into that because it's kind of beyond the scope of this course. But for now, I want you to keep in mind how these methods work. I want you to get kind of comfortable comparing the results, and then also step away from the math calculation piece and think about the big picture of what's kind of happening with these calculations and the results from these calculations, more so than the calculations themselves, okay? So good luck on the skills assignment, and then after the skills, you'll have a case study to take a look at, and we'll be done with this chapter/unit.